Live every day as if it were the last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by. Sing songs of
I like Day of the Dead, El Dia de los Muertos. Special days, November 1st, November 2nd, for remembering our loved ones who have died. For years, I've made and submitted pieces in memory of my loved ones to South Broadway Cultural Center here in Albuquerque and the National Hispanic Cultural Center for their Day of the Dead displays. I reject Halloween, and one of the reasons is how adults sadly give out loads of slow poison sugar shit to kids. Sugar is the gateway drug for millions to alcoholism, heroin, and cocaine addiction. Sugar can cause and worsen over 60 diseases. Acne, alcoholism, as I just mentioned, allergies, anxiety, arthritis, appendicitis, asthma, behavior problems, bone loss, bloating. Sugar can cause and worsen cancer, binge eating, colitis, cataracts, constipation, depression, diabetes, difficulty concentrating, diverticulitis. Sugar can cause and worsen edema, that's fluid retention in the body where you puff up, fatigue, food cravings, gallstones, gout, heart disease, high bad cholesterol, high blood pressure, low good cholesterol, hormonal problems. Sugar can cause and worsen indigestion, insomnia, kidney stones, liver problems, menstrual difficulties, mental illness, mood swings, muscle pain, being fat, all infections, including COVID, flu, colds, sexually transmitted diseases. Sugar can cause and worsen multiple sclerosis, tooth decay. And of course, from my sugar addiction decades ago, I have no teeth left. Ulcers, nearsightedness, early aging, hyperactivity and orneriness in kids, high triglycerides, kidney damage, kidney stones, heart disease. Sugar can cause and worsen varicose veins, emphysema, loss of minerals, periodontal disease, hypoglycemia, rheumatism, eczema, psoriasis, hemorrhoids, Crohn's disease, and retina holes and detachment. I had surgery on both my retinas back in the 70s. I was terrified of going blind. And sadly, no doctor at that time told me, stop eating damn sugar. Sugar causes eye problems. As a kid and in my 20s, I was severely addicted to ice cream, cake, cookies, candy. But I woke up and I stopped eating sugar shit 40 years ago. If we give a damn about being healthy and feeling good, our number one question when we eat should be, is this food good for my body? If you own a car that runs on gasoline, would you put dirt and water and mustard in the tank and expect it to run? So why do people expect their bodies to work well, putting in the sugar shit, the processed crap from factories and fast food joints? Eat only the healthy foods of the earth. Sadly, most people choose food mainly by how it tastes, or if their friends eat it, or if they see it advertised, or if this is what they grew up eating at home. For me, nutrition is far more important than just taste. And when you switch to healthy foods, only healthy foods, little by little, you'll come to enjoy the taste. No God heard and helped the millions murdered in the concentration camps, the Nazi gas ovens. So why would U.S. Christians pray for God to help their kids' basketball team win? No God heard and helped millions murdered in war by the United States, in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. So why would U.S. Christians pray for God to heal their sick child? No God heard and helped thousands murdered by the United States in Guatemala and El Salvador. So why would some people here pray to God to win the lottery? No God heard and helped millions starving to death worldwide for centuries. So why would some U.S. Christians pray to find a parking space? Sadly, 56 years ago, as a very sincere young Christian preacher, 20 years old, I spread much religious bullshit about God, the imaginary friend. I sincerely apologize. A woman in Tennessee wrote, "Dear Abby, I'm so disgusted. My husband has started walking around the house with no underwear, letting it all hang out, so to speak. And then he makes comments like, 'Doesn't this look good?' She says, 'I'm sickened by his behavior. I feel violated. How do I tell him to stop without hurting his male pride?'" Well, I wish I could speak to her directly. I ask, what man would want to be married to a woman who is sickened by seeing his naked body? But also, I would say, what woman would want to be married to a man who is sickened by seeing her naked body? Sadly, many women, many men, many non-binary people, straight, gay, bisexual, go to their graves never having made love to anyone they were strongly, sexually, and romantically attracted to. African American Darrell Davis converted more than a dozen members of the Ku Klux Klan from their racist ideology. Darrell Davis said, when you sit down with somebody one-on-one, you begin to find things that you have in common. And the more you build on that, the more you break down barriers. Davis first encountered racism when he was one of two African American students in his elementary school in Massachusetts. They pointed at me and they said, we're going to send you back to Africa. If you don't go, you'll be exterminated. Davis said that experience did not move him to hate, but made him want to understand racism, to understand white supremacy. Why do some people think they're better because of the color of their skin? And from that day forth, he says, I made it a point to learn everything I could about supremacy. Davis is a professional piano player, and he said he first met a member of the Ku Klux Klan in the early 80s while he was playing with his band at a truck stop in Maryland. Davis said he was approached by a man who complimented him on his piano playing. He said he learned the man was a white supremacist after a long conversation. He looked back at me just as plain as day and said, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan, Davis said. The Klansman gave Davis the contact information for Roger Kelly, who was then the most powerful member of the KKK in Maryland. Davis said he set up his first private meeting with Kelly by having his white secretary call and schedule an appointment with this most powerful member of the Ku Klux Klan in Maryland. Davis said he and Kelly were on edge during their conversation, but they agreed to meet again. He was the head of the Ku Klux Klan, and here I was, a black guy, but we were sitting at the same table talking. We were agreeing and disagreeing, but everything we did, we were civilized about it. Davis said he continued to speak with Kelly, and they developed a respectful relationship. Davis said eventually renounced Kelly eventually renounced, turned his back on white supremacy and the Ku Klux Klan. African American Davis said a couple years back, Roger Kelly quit the Ku Klux Klan, and when he left the Klan, he gave me his robe and hood. Now he'll come out with me on my lectures sometimes to talk. Davis said Kelly was not the only Ku Klux Klan member to give up the robe and the hood. I've gotten many robes, many hoods from Klanspeople from all over the nation just because I sat down and talked to people. Anybody can do this, he said. All you have to do is take the time to sit down and talk to people without making any assumptions about them. Then listen and share your thoughts with them. We human beings can change. We can wake up. We can turn from evil. Why is marriage called tying the knot. I sure as hell do not want anyone tied in a knot to me. And I urge every couple, a man and woman, two women, two men, every couple considering marriage to ask themselves this question: do I ever know myself or the other person or the future well enough to know for sure we both will do well with only each other romantically until death? I'm going to repeat that question. I wish you'd file it in your brain forever or write it down. Do I ever know myself or the other person or the future well enough to know for sure we both will do well with only each other romantically until death? I aim to tell the truth. I aim not to make foolish promises that I will later regret. A solemn vow that many break, or they want to break, a solemn vow I refuse to make to anyone. I've been in love with certain men. I treasure mutually passionate romance with certain men, but I do not want to be caged, nor to cage any man romantically for life. I want him to stay friends and lovers with me because he wants to, not because he feels trapped in a box, a cage, not chained to me. And like many people, I am able to be openly and honestly in love with more than one person at the same time. No one person can fill all of our emotional needs. And if he and I part, I do not want to sue him, and I do not want him to sue me. Marriage partners often take each other for granted and slack off from exercise, from staying healthy. They often turn to booze or junk food or to buying crap they do not need for comfort. And married couples often hold each other back and use each other as an excuse not to change, not to grow. And blaming the other, one says, I cannot stop eating meat or sugar because he or she has that stuff here and I cannot resist eating it. Or one says, I would live simply in a much smaller place, but she or he refuses to change. Marriage partners often act as if they own each other. So they try to control each other and get sometimes insanely jealous, even to the point of murder. Some people may do best with only one romantic partner until death. But even they would be wise never to pledge themselves only to each other romantically until death. As the years pass, they can check if they both are doing well with only this one romantic partner. And some people have their number one romantic relationship with one person for decades, but also enjoy close friendship and pleasurable sex with other persons and do it honestly and openly with their number one partner and everybody involved. Some people are able to be deeply in love with two or more persons at the same time for many years and do that openly and honestly with little or no jealousy. The rule of no sex for couples outside marriage often breeds lies and cover-ups and heavy frustration, boredom, violent jealousy. Marriage often becomes a duel instead of a duet. My own parents might have been much better friends had they never married. Marriage destroys many friendships. Some couples become better friends after divorce. My parents were not a good match. If I had been my mother, I do not know how I could have coped being married to my dad. And if I had been my dad, I do not know how I could have coped being married to my mother. They were married 48 years until my mother died, and often it was a war of words, hurt feelings, rage. My mother needed, wanted, and was capable of much deeper intimacy than my dad gave her, or perhaps was even able to give her. I learned from my mother and dad not to get or to stay trapped in a rotten marriage, making each other miserable. Far worse than having no romantic companion is feeling trapped by a vow to someone I no longer want to be with, or to someone who no longer wants to be with me. Yes to passionate romance. Yes to close friendships. Yes to heart-to-heart conversations. Marriage for me? Hell no. Never. The U.S. military has 800 to 1,000 bases around the world outside the United States. The U.S. military causes more of the climate crisis than any one of the 140 nations in the world. There are more nations than that in the world, but the U.S. military causes more of the climate crisis than any one of 140 nations in the world. The massive carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases causing the climate emergency from U.S. military bases outside the United States. We're just talking about those now outside the United States, are not included in the total for the United States as a nation. The United States spends more money for war than the next 9 nations combined. A peace-loving country? Crazy. Hell no. No way. The United States spends more money for mass murder in war than the next 9 nations put together. The U.S. government calls it for defense, but no nation has invaded the United States since 1812, 210 years ago. Over 200 years ago, 210 years ago. And many years ago, the now so-called Defense Department was named the Department of War. That was much more honest. The United States has thousands of nuclear bombs, thousands of warplanes. All other nations combined have about 70 military bases outside their nations. Think of that. All other nations in the world combined have about 70 military bases outside their nations. But the U.S. has 800 to 1,000 military bases outside the United States. Do people here wonder why millions and millions of people hate and fear this government? Since World War II, and besides the U.S. Cold War with Russia, the U.S. military wars and interventions have been almost completely against people who are not white. The U.S. government is drunk on spending for war, to steal and to hog the resources and cheap labor of many smaller nations. Many billions of U.S. dollars every year for war make the hundreds of U.S. evil weapons companies and oil companies filthy rich. Like Raytheon and many more, General Dynamics, many. Some of the deadly U.S. military equipment is transferred to local police in the U.S. to use against people here who are protesting racism and police brutality. Many people in the Pacific Island nations and many U.S. veterans have suffered sickness and death from the many tests of U.S. nuclear weapons on those Pacific islands. Rising sea levels because of the climate emergency threaten many island nations. The U.S.'s depleted uranium, U.S. Agent Orange, U.S. chemical and biological weapons, U.S. burn pits, U.S. destruction of oil fields, fires and chemical spraying sicken and kill many people and their next generations in those places where the U.S. has tested weapons and waged war. The victims include U.S. veterans and their children. Do they tell you that if you go to sign up to be a soldier? The U.S. military bait and seduce largely black people, brown people, native people, low-income whites into the world's most dangerous gang. I've not paid one damn bloody penny of federal income tax for 43 years. More than 1/3 of federal income tax pays for U.S. mass murder in wars. The debt from past wars, the present wars, and the future wars. Always follow the money and always follow the oil. Iraq has natural gas, oil, and port access to the Persian Gulf. Afghanistan has natural gas, oil, lithium, and opium. Africa has oil and uranium. Cell phones contain cobalt and coltan from the Congo in Africa. Iran has the second largest oil reserves in that region. Follow the money. Follow the other resources that the U.S. wants to steal and grab for itself. follow the oil. A longtime member of Alcoholics Anonymous said he drank for happiness and became unhappy. He drank for joy, became miserable. He drank for sociability, he became argumentative. He drank for sophistication, he became obnoxious. The longtime member of Alcoholics Anonymous said he drank for friendship and made enemies. He drank for sleep, he woke up tired. He drank for strength, he felt weak. He drank for relaxation, he got the shakes. He drank for courage, he became afraid. He drank for confidence, became doubtful. He drank to make conversation easier and slurred his speech. He drank to feel heavenly. He ended up feeling like hell. From a longtime member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Up to 95% of the poison chemical pesticides most people in the United States consume comes from eating meat, cheese, ice cream, and drinking milk. Why? When the cows, the pigs, the chickens eat crops sprayed and grown with poison chemical pesticides, those poison chemicals concentrate in the animals' meat, milk, eggs. And when people eat the meat, the ice cream, the cheese, the eggs, and drink the milk, they get a concentrated dose of poison chemicals, usually without knowing it. The further up the food chain, the more chemicals concentrate. If we eat no meat, no dairy, no eggs, if we eat only plant foods, we avoid up to 95% of the poison chemical pesticides most people in the U.S. eat. Having a fat belly lowers the sex hormone testosterone. Booze and cigarettes lower the sex hormone testosterone. Soy can lower the sex hormone testosterone. I eat no soy, I drink no booze, I smoke no cigarettes. I do not eat the junk food. I do not drink the booze that makes the beer bellies. Why pay those filthy rich companies to lower my sex hormone and to slowly kill me? Living tomorrow is not guaranteed to me or to you or to anyone on this whole earth. To hear some people talk about what they're going to do next month or in 2 years or 20 years, they seem to assume they will be alive. How foolish. Our lives can change or end in one instant when we least expect it. So when talking about something in the future, I often say, if I'm alive and able, or I aim to do, or I hope to, or I plan to, because no one can say for sure about their tomorrow. If I'm healthy in body and mind, I aim to live and love passionately until the day I die. But I don't know for sure. Would a marathon runner want to slow down as he gets closer to the finish line? If I'm healthy in body and mind, why would I want to slow down as an activist against war, against paying federal income tax for war, an activist for living simply and fairly in this world, an activist for eating only healthy food, an activist for gay liberation, an activist for naked body freedom. Why would I want to slow down as I get closer to the finish line? My death. I treasure friends. I treasure heart-to-heart conversations. The more personal, real, deep, the better. I treasure my friends, old friends, living, friends dead, new friends. Sadly, many friends from past years and places I now have no contact with. I do not know if they're living or dead. And some friends have turned away. They've gone cold because of my being openly gay, or because I'm no longer a believer. But my heart's door is not locked to those friends who have turned away or gone cold. If they decide in the future they want to be friends with me again. I learned from my friend Bob in Illinois to keep making new friends and younger friends until the day I die. And before Bob died at 94, he wrote to me from Illinois saying, "To my one and only friend." How sad. He had known many people years before in his business. His beloved wife had died. Other personal friends had died. And if we live to a very old age and do not keep making new friends, if we do not keep making younger friends, we can end up friendship bankrupt. And friendship bankrupt is as bad as being hungry and homeless. Friendship bankrupt is as bad as living in a sick body. Never stop making new friends and young friends as we still treasure all our friends of whatever age, men, women, non-binary, straight, gay, bisexual, living and dead. Tom Giago was the editor of the Lakota Nation Journal. He died this year, and he writes about the horrors that he experienced in boarding schools. 3 generations ago, the federal government performed an experiment on the Indian people of America, one that is still impacting the lives of this generation of Native Americans. It was called the boarding school system of education. Government-funded boarding schools were established in different parts of the United States, such as Phoenix, Rapid City, South Dakota, Genoa, Nebraska, Carlisle, Pennsylvania, Carson City, Nevada, and more, with the sole purpose of de-Indianizing the Indian, taking the Indian out of this person. The unspoken policy of the government and the different churches was quietly implemented without separation of church and state. The edict was simple. It said, kill the Indian, save the child. In many ways, it also killed the child. Our neighbors in Canada also addressed the final solution for their Indian population. They established Indian missions and government schools, and like their southern neighbors in the United States, they established the government-run institutions far from the Indian reserves, keep them away from their dear families. And they also divided the Indian lands up like so many pieces of pie and authorized different religious groups to build mission boarding schools where the children would be incarcerated. Shorn of our long hair, dressed in military-type uniforms, beaten or punished in other ways for speaking in our native languages, we soon became traumatized. The treatment we received was so foreign to us that we could have been relocated to a foreign country or to Mars and felt no differently than we did when forced into these institutions. In olden days, Tom Giago says, it literally did take a village to raise a child because the child was welcome in every teepee. There was no corporal punishment for children, no spanking, no beating. It was unheard of, at least in the villages of the Lakota. But I would say it was unheard of in nearly all Indian villages. He says, my first week at Holy Rosary Indian Mission on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota was one I will never forget, although I was only 6 years old at the time. A young boy of about 8 years was caught doing something he should not have done. The Jesuit in charge made us line up in military ranks and dragged the offender, this 8-year-old little boy, by his neck out to the front of us. He then proceeded to beat the boy with a braided leather strap he called the cat. Many of us had just arrived for our first taste of mission life. Some of the boys barely spoke English, had been raised in very traditional Lakota homes. And we saw this display of cruelty with fear, anguish. And some of us cried even though we were not getting the whipping. The image of that merciless beating haunted us from then on. Nearly all of us would be on the receiving end of the cat, which may have been short for cat of nine tails, before the year was over. A few weeks later, my good friend Basil Braveheart had the audacity to speak a word in Lakota, and he was overheard by someone in charge. And once more we formed ranks while Basil was dragged to the front. He was forced to bite down on a heavy rubber band and grip it tightly while the man in charge stretched it out and let it smack back against the boy's lips. And some of the more traditional boys were so shocked at this callous act of violence, they shrieked out in our native Lakota language. They were so offended, they did not care if they suffered the same punishment. And we were told our ancestors were heathen, our way of life primitive, our warrior ancestors savages. Good Lord, says Tom Giago, how does one expect children to be so badly abused and not suffer some serious consequences? It has taken many of us years and others a lifetime to cope with this traumatic time in our lives. Many of my friends, he says, never recovered. They died as hopeless alcoholics or were executed behind prison bars. And some of the fragile, innocent young Indian ladies became hopeless drunks, dope addicts, sex workers. Many boys and girls had been raped while only 8 or 9 years of age, and as a group, we have suffered through broken homes, broken marriages, broken bones, broken ideals, broken dreams. Many of us never learned to be good husbands or wives or parents. For us, the connection to our culture, our traditional way of life, our spirituality had been torn from us. Is it any wonder that so many Indians of my generation and the generation before us grew up with so little self-esteem? We almost hated ourselves because we were being told by adults that everything about us was wrong, and we were witnessing some of the worst acts of violence imaginable. The testimony by Tom Giago, editor of the Lakota Nation Journal, about the official kidnapping of Indian children, the soul rape, the cultural rape by the U.S. and Canadian governments and many religious groups. Tom died this year. Hundreds of jobs harm people, other animals, and the earth far more than help. If I care about life and people, how can I grow tobacco or sell cigarettes? If I care about life and people, how can I do a job torturing animals in a testing laboratory? If I care about life and people, how can I drive a Pepsi-Cola or a Budweiser truck delivering those poisons? If I care about life and people, how can I farm with poison chemicals? If I care about life and people, how can I sell luxury new clothes that were made in sweatshops? If I care about life and people, how can I design bombs of mass murder at Sandia or Los Alamos weapons labs? If I care about life and people, how can I be a lawyer or a doctor getting filthy rich off other people's mistakes and misery? If I care about life and people, how can I work for the CIA? If I care about life and people, how can I work in a gambling casino? How can I run a sugar donut bakery? If I care about life and people, how can I raise animals on factory farms? If I care about life and people, how can I kill and butcher animals for people to eat? How can I install sprinkler systems for grass lawns in this desert? How can I work in a shopping mall selling high-priced stuff no one needs? Hundreds of jobs harm people, harm the earth, harm animals, far more than help. Hundreds of jobs are not worth doing no matter how much you're paid, No matter how high the prestige in your family and community, if you're in one of these jobs now because of money problems to survive, make up your mind to start now to live simply and to change jobs as soon as possible in order to help people, help animals, help the earth, even if you're paid much less. I worked for years part-time in my parents' cattle and hog business. Sadly, I participated in much cruelty to those animals. Learn from my mistake. We can wake up. We can change. Many diamonds sold in the United States are heartbreaking stories of greed, violence, mutilation. African children are forced to mine diamonds. They're forced into slavery to mine diamonds that many people in this country are proud to wear. If these African children fail to work or to produce, they're beaten, punished, even their arms cut off. Many diamonds sold in the United States are these blood diamonds, agents of terror. And there's no easy way to know for sure if the diamond you buy is a blood diamond. If you have a conscience, never buy diamond jewelry anyhow. Because even if it's not a blood diamond, why waste money on something no one needs, while others in this world suffer hunger and cold and sickness with no home? I will never buy diamond jewelry the rest of my life. Boycott the whole diamond industry. I would not ride a motorcycle for all the money in the world. I knew a woman here in Albuquerque years ago, part of her leg was chopped off, amputated, because of a motorcycle accident. My friend Louis Ramirez in Illinois many years ago was riding his motorcycle, and he turned his head to speak to his girlfriend who was with him on the motorcycle. He crashed. He died. His brother Daniel, who was my close friend, was working with the ambulance that day, and Daniel found his brother dead from the motorcycle crash. Devastating. Motorcycles have no protection. And watch the news, how many motorcycle drivers are killed. There's no protection, except some of them wear helmets, many do not. But you can be killed even if you're wearing a helmet. I strongly support a woman's right to breastfeed her baby in public. If the mother is healthy, breastfeeding is much healthier for that baby than formula. Breastfeeding is much cheaper than formula. Breastfed babies have fewer allergies, fewer ear infections. Breastfed babies have less diabetes, less cancer as they get older, less asthma. Mothers eat no meat, eat no dairy, no junk food, drink no booze, smoke no cigarettes, to reduce greatly the poisons in your breast milk. Because, as I mentioned earlier, 95% of the pesticides most people consume in this country are from the meat and the dairy they eat. Breastfeeding is clean. Breastfeeding is safe. Breastfeeding is natural. Breastfeeding is convenient. I strongly support a woman's right to breastfeed her baby in public. Some reasons many men who are attracted to men do not have sex with men. They fear God's going to punish them and send them forever to hell. Some fear rejection by their family and friends and society if they are found out to have sex with men. And some men fear losing the sex and romance with their wives or their girlfriends, whom they love and whom they're strongly attracted to. But they also want sex and romance with men. And most people who get very sick and die from COVID have 1 to 7 underlying conditions. We need to prevent, we need to cure underlying conditions to save lives and to make people healthy. But the sugar companies, the junk food companies, the booze, the cigarette, the meat, the dairy, the drug companies make billions of dollars from causing the underlying conditions. Why? Why pay them to make us sick and to kill us? I refuse. Thanks for watching, listening. Fresh piss to your health. Good night.
Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone.